Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk about, as Maureen says, behavioural change techniques on doing this. Now, I'm not a behavioural change scientist. This is something that, as a company, Anglian Water, has really invested in. We've heard about all the techniques, and there are quite a lot out there in terms of how we can clear what's actually down there. And we're continuing as a company to do that. We'll do sewer rehab. We're doing planned preventative maintenance, which is the jetting of sewers and clearing out the blockages. Often, where we haven't, where we're not actually taking the items out, we're just pushing them further down, which is a lot of jetting involved. When we haven't got a recycling kind of unit on there, it's not actually getting rid of the problem. But we've taken a different approach in terms of trying to prevent the items getting down there in the first place, and that is a very tough task. Just to put it in context, this is, for Anglian Water, we have set ourselves 10 goals under our Love Every Drop strategy, and one of those is no pollutions, and obviously that's quite a, same with no incidents, that is quite a difficult one to get to, but we took the approach that obviously no pollution incident is acceptable. The fog campaign that I've been running fits with 4 of those goals that we've set. But we are committed to reducing the number of blockages that we get as a company each year. Now, this campaign started off and was based on public sewer networks. Now, as some of you may well know, that last year, in October, all the water companies inherited private sewers, which is good for the customer because it gets rid of that confusion, but it means that we, in terms of, as a company, we've doubled our network, our sewer network. So all the things that I'll talk about today, the fact that the numbers are based on the actual existing network, but with an eye that that will double in the future. Now, as a company, we spend 7 million just purely on jetting, which is something that has been increasing. So the aim is that we want to be reducing that spend. It's customers' money after all, and we want to be putting that to better use. This is a slide I use, and I'll talk a bit more about when I go out into the community, but it puts it in context. And I think naturally we're all guilty of putting things down there, flushing things down the toilet, pouring things down the sink, but we forget that the actual network was designed for public health reasons, and in fact it's in need of some sort of health benefits itself, really. It's sort of trying to sort out these problems. This diagram here, I mean, it just puts it into context that people often don't realise the consequences of their action. It's often very convenient to flush items, but it may not necessarily impact on them or their pipes or in their garden or in their home, but it's somewhere down the sewer network. And I say the figures that I'm quoting, 15,000 blockages we had in 2010, and half of those we calculated were avoidable, i.e. things that shouldn't be put down there in the first place, customer behaviour. It's something that we all do. So we set ourselves a goal that we were going to reduce by half those 7,500 avoidable blockages by the end of 2015. A big ask, but we're committed to doing that. So what we did, and this is something quite different, I guess, in the industry, but all water companies are looking at it now, is that following on from sort of Cameron's nudge unit, we know that it works, that you can, we approached a social marketing company, and we know that we can persuade people to change behaviour. I say Cameron's unit, the nudge unit do it very effectively. But there's a lot of confusion around that, and as we all know, we're not two-dimensional people, so there's lots of factors going on in your life in terms of, be it religion or beliefs, time restraints. So coming out with the awareness that we used to do and thinking people will read the awareness saying, oh, don't put something down the toilet or down the sink, and that they'll take notice and change their behaviour. In reality, it's common sense. That doesn't happen. Even in the best will in the world, that's not going to happen. So the keystone and the cornerstone, really, to what we did was research, and that's probably the 80% cornerstone of social marketing, is that you have to understand your audience. And ideally, what we would have done is done research in one area and then done the intervention and rolled out the programme, then do research in another area. But realistically, we have invested a lot of money, but that is hugely expensive to do that across a big region. So what we did, we took one area, which was in Peterborough, we chose as a typical city in our region, and we looked and we questioned over 600 people, domestic and restaurants and takeaways, just to find out what their awareness was on the issue, whether they'd experienced problems. But the main thing you're trying to find out is what are their willingness to act, what are their motivators for acting, what are the barriers for changing their behaviour. And from that research, we actually found there's a huge willingness to change. Again, it's raising awareness at the same time as you're surveying these people, but there is a great willingness to change. It's just that it's confusing. They wanted to be told, I mean, I've got reams and reams of this research, but one of the key things was, tell us exactly what we need to do then with this waste. And I haven't brought along lots of fog pictures. I think Charlie showed some of them, but we've got some extreme examples of what happens. But largely, the biggest problem for us is fat, soils and grease. So people, largely restaurants and takeaways, are a big producer of fog, putting that down the drain. But also the biggest problem as well for us is sanitary products. And of course, when those two items, I've got some lovely pictures, when those two items combine together, they're like concrete. And even fog just on its own will have that same density. So it's a huge problem. But they just wanted to be, one of the key things was to tell us exactly what we should do. Now that sounds common sense, but until you spell it out, until you put it in literature, that's not, people don't put that into their daily lives so easily. The next thing is, once we've found out why people do what they do, what is stopping them from changing the behaviour to what's called the preferred behaviour, which in this case is either putting it in the bin or recycling the oil, is then looking at what interventions will help them to do that. So it's all based around nudge or prompt. So you put it in interventions, giveaways that will just act as a prompt. One example is a sink strainer, for example, that we give away to domestic audiences. Now that's not going to catch the fat, soils and grease, but it's a prompt that when they come to do it, or should be putting it elsewhere. So this is a very detailed slide, but it just walks you through the process in terms of the first thing, as I said, we did was understand the context. So we found out what people are, through the surveys, what they're actually doing and their awareness on the issue. Then did a lot of desktop research, because we found out that when we started this back in end of 2010, there wasn't actually a lot of research out there, up-to-date research. The RAP did something in 2011 which was looking at waste to sewers and how much is disposed of in terms of drink and various other things. So that was quite timely. But this is a common problem internationally, obviously. So we started doing that desktop research, looking at what was out there, knowing that there was quite a lot of gaps in that research. So then it's undertaking our own research with our customers and also with our own field tech. So when they were going out to a blockage, we were saying to them, tell us exactly what's down there. And that's how we got our main causes of blockage. And in this case, with the campaign, it was the fat, soils and grease and the unflushable items, as we call them. So it's just sanitary products. But it's not just sanitary products covers not only, I can say now, tampons and sanitary pads, but it's also talking about razors and cotton buds, which I'm sure everybody will be aware causes a huge problem. The next thing, they're looking at the audience, then actually developing our strategy and piloting our interventions, which we did in Peterborough, which I'll talk about just a bit later. Evaluate that programme, and then before we rolled it out regionally, which was in last October, we did that with a light show, which if we've got time to show, I will do. But that is also another key intervention. It wasn't just a nice thank you to Peterborough and all the stakeholders that were involved. It was actually something that we wanted to go viral, because that's a good way of getting people to pass it on to their friends, family, and it's still on the Keep It Clear website. But this programme is very much about fixing the cause, not the symptom. And just so you're aware, these are the items that we were, the main causes of blockages that our field techs were coming up with. So there, that means now you've got your identified audience of who are the main users. And we used TGI analysis, kind of no-brainer really, that with the sanitary products, it was largely women, mums with babies, nappies, and with teenage daughters. And we did a lot then on terms of engaging them on what they actually did. So you had your big research at the front, and then through the targeting of the products, you could then go and do in-depth interviews and conversations. Lots of ways to do that, especially with teenagers. It's very difficult if you try to interview them on a one-to-one, so it's putting them into groups where they're more likely to feed off each other. And then with the food servicing establishments, it wasn't only interviewing them, it was actually what is an immersion technique where you're actually going and watching the practice. So they may be saying something, but actually when you're watching them do it, they're doing a completely different practice. Key findings from our main research, and I think the first 3 bullet points really say the same thing, but if you are going to do this, the ideal opportunity to change somebody's behaviour is when they've experienced a problem themselves. Now, that being said, as I've mentioned earlier, it's not always the person doing the action that is causing the problem, and often, yes, you can go and you can talk to them about the blockage, but often it's the neighbour down the street. But that's the time to engage, and it's often we've found that that's when they'll take the approach, well, let me have the literature, I know so-and-so, I will go and do it. And that's one of the key principles of social marketing is people are more likely to change their behaviour if it's coming from, it's all common sense, but if it's coming from someone that they know or trust, rather than as a company angling water. So that was the main findings from the research. Also making it localised. Now, as I say, the water industry are looking at this as a whole, but our most successful result still is in Peterborough, where we actually customised it and personalised it to names to Peterborough and to names of streets. Now, we then took an approach that will do a generic literature, which has worked, but not to the same extent as it's all part of wanting to be in the norm, and also knowing if your neighbour's doing it, if your friend's doing it, and they live in that area, people again are more likely to change their behaviour. So personalisation is a key thing. And then this is just that we then, after that, we tested out a brand for this, which people could recognise, and this is being pushed more and more, and Keep It Clear was one that they had resonance with them, and that they felt that's what they understood about keeping the sewer clear. Very busy slide here, but that's the roadmap to what we did. So in Peterborough, which was our pilot, as I mentioned, we started off doing raising awareness, so you get cut through. So that's in papers, radio advertising. When we actually did this, we were working with Peterborough Islam, and they actually took it on, and they run, it was through Ramadan, and they did 7 weeks of advertising on that. But it's not largely just to get the cut through. Then we identified problem streets, and in this case, we did 10,000 mailers out to people in those targeted streets of Peterborough. Then that was followed up by going into community groups. So you're working with a lead community organisation in that group, again, because it's somebody that person knows. It's not angling water going in. So you brief the leaders of those community groups, whether they're residents associations, religious groups, and they're the ones that take the messaging, take the interventions, take the literature, and then share it in whatever format they know reaches that group's values or beliefs.
Can I just hurry you along, Rachel?
Yeah. And then finally, the FSE is going in, just a brief conversation with we designed a pack, which we could look at. Again, they didn't want training, so it's very much a case of just going in 5 minutes, very friendly, going in 5 minutes. We're not there to inspect their kitchens, it's not our job. But they said from the research it would be useful to have something to leave behind that we can train staff with, and of course in restaurants and takeaways there was a high turnover of staff. And then we got the results, some of the key results for Peterborough, but that was only after a 7-week period. But we reduced blockages in those streets by 60% in that 7-week period. And then we launched it officially with this light show back in October, so we launched it across our region. Since then, been busy looking, did the same approach, in 6 other areas. Peterborough, which is far left there, that is still our most successful. One, because it's been running the longest. That data was compiled at the end of March. That had been running 9 months at that point. But what that chart shows in the dark blue is a 3-year average of number of blockages, so 276, running from end of June, July, through to March. And the light blue figure, which shows the 61 blockages, is that same time period, but in the Keep It Clear, when we launched the Keep It Clear there back in June. So it compares actual data, hence the reason that when you get to the end here, you're only comparing probably a month's worth of data, but at least it's actual versus actual. Red is the Keep It Clear, what we call the Keep It Clear blockage average overall, so 488 previous 3 years in those areas, compared to once the Keep It Clear kicked in, it dramatically dropped to 175, and then the control areas are 10 towns, very typical, high number of blockage areas, but it showed that if you did nothing and just did your PPM and various maintenance, you're still going to get a rise in blockages. So it's showing that that is definitely working. I won't go through all that, but some of the results. A key thing to that is working with local authorities, because there are different waste policies out there, which makes it confusing for residents. But it's key that working with local authorities and really understanding and defining what customers can do with various waste. That was our light show, and that is the actual framework of the programme. The next thing that I'm working on now is how you make that sustainable. So whilst it's been nearly a year since we did Peterborough and we're still getting those results, anytime people are going to revert back to their old behaviour. So the next part, which we'll be launching in June, is how you make that behaviour a habit and how you make it sustainable.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, we've heard from our 3 speakers, all on sort of different subjects. 2 of them looking at 2 different technologies, but both with a common aim of cleaning our sewers. And obviously Rachel just talking about how we can change people's behaviour and about what they put down sewers. And I think from all of the speakers we've seen some strange things that have ended up down there. And so I'm going to throw it up to questions now. We have a microphone that will be wandering around. So do we have any questions? Gentleman over there. Can you give your name and name and company?
I've got a number as well. Ben Bax, Head of Customer Services for May. Question for Matthew, actually. Like you, I think it's interesting that everyone knows that I've been using clean water stuff for ages and ages. Is there an application in sewer, and you guys are certainly looking at that? Are there any environmental risks, do you think, in terms of what happens to the gunk that comes out the other end? And have you thought about ways that can be collected so that it doesn't get into watercourses, particularly in rural areas?
Yeah, great question. That's an area that needs a bit more thought. In the job that I showed you there, the entirety of the effluent was captured in a waste tanker, and that waste tanker then went to a sewage treatment works. We don't think that the environment was at any risk at any point. However, we would like that process to be more efficient. When we apply it normally, we only capture the ice. We don't capture, because generally the ice is holding whatever's in the pipe. So yeah, it needs more thought.
It's interesting thinking.
Any more questions? Well, I have a question for Rachel. Obviously, the research that you did into sort of behavioural patterns at the moment about what people put down the loos and so on is quite exciting, but it's not. What I would like to know is, you said that it's, you're working at a local level, but it is a national problem. Are you working, as Anglian, are you working with the other water companies to come up with a common solution? Are you sort of passing over findings, etc., to find a national way of solving this problem?
Yeah, as we've said it is a problem that has been in the industry for years and years. Unfortunately, it's getting worse because there are more items that can be flushed. I won't name one manufacturer, but they've just produced something that is said that it's flushable. It actually goes away in 4 days, but when you think about most of these items, these flushable items, you actually, with a sewer network, it's gone to the treatment centre within 2 days, yet they don't dissolve or disintegrate for another 4 days. That's 2 days too long. But we are working as an industry. There's an interestingly named SNAP, which used to be Sewer Network Against Abuse. I think they've called it something different now. And we have all jointly put into some funding on behavioural change. But one thing that's been clear about this is that whilst at the moment we are still in our different water companies in different areas, you really do need to understand your customers and your local areas, and the fact that you actually personalise it to a location has been the most effective. So we are sharing it, and we work with Water UK as part of a member of Water UK, and in fact we are looking at how if we do something nationally like a television campaign, but really working through this model in terms of working with community organisations. We found that so far, in terms of everything we've done, to be the most effective.
Any more questions? Yes?
Thank you. Charlie Fairfield again, Edinburgh Napier. I was one for Matthew. Have you found a problem with the differential thermal contraction as you cool a sealed system? Do you have any leaks at the end?
We looked at thermal contraction, and the answer was there was negligible effect. This was in a pressurized system, but the strain on the pipe as the ice passed along was significantly less than a hydrant being opened downstream. In an unpressurized network, I don't have the answer for that, but the answer in pressurized networks was it was negligible.
Any more questions? Well, I'm going to ask probably what is a stupid question for both Matthew and Charlie. Obviously, we've heard about the ice technology, we've heard about the water high-pressure jetting. Is there a limit to the size of pipe that both technologies can be used for, either in minimum or as in the largest?
In terms of the jetting limits, there are no limit to the size of something you can jet. They use water jets to cut the slots for the gates in the Panama Canal. They use jets for clearing landmines for hydro-demolition. They use jets at 30-metre height on rock faces in Colorado for mining applications. So provided you can centre the jet and move the jet, there's no limit to the size of sewer you could. And the smaller limit, looking at minima, then you would be ill-advised to go and jet anything smaller than about 30mm subduct diameter anyway, because the jet would have to then have a very, very concentrated nozzle, and then you're into something that's more designed for cutting rather than cleaning. So I wouldn't go any lower than 30, but up the way, the sky's the limit.
Matthew?
Yeah, no lower limit at all. The upper limit is really a function of how much ice we have, and at the moment we can clean up to about 600 mil. We think we probably can go to 700 mil diameter. So that is a lot of ice. But we expect that there are some other practical issues that we need to resolve with managing that volume of liquid and ice. But around about 600 is where we think we're going to be comfortable.
Thank you. Any more questions? Come on, don't be shy. Oh, there's one at the back.
My name is Sabah Al-Tawil from Glamorgan University. My question is, I have an idea about using the water from the washing machine to put it in the flusher of the toilet. So is there any problem for the pipes to do the water from this source and keep safe without any problems because you need a tank and special sub-network for that.
I like the idea. Anything that recycles something that otherwise would go straight to waste. Where we have problems in Scotland and rural Ireland is the high incidence of properties connected to a septic tank, and the concentration of detergent would probably kill the septic action. But on mains water, I see no problem with that. You might want to be careful though, depending on the nature of your detergent. Your detergent can be highly ionic or microbial. With a microbial surfactant, there is by and large, as you heard in the presentation this morning from the chap from Oxford, Dr. Dwayne, Microbial Solutions Limited presentation this morning, I forget the fellow's surname. Most of these microbial solutions are harmless and wash away. Some of the ionic surfactants will remain and build up and can cause quite a few undesirable side effects at blockages themselves that they can't then surmount. But in principle, yeah, good idea.
One more question.
I've just got a question for Rachel. Gary Fulcher from the Environment Agency in Midland. I'd just like to ask if this problem is going to get worse as we push towards less water demand in terms of using less drinking water. Because as less water gets flushed down sewers, then the problem is going to be exacerbated, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, it is a very good question. The approach that I've always held is that it's not the lack of water that's going down the pipes that cause the blockages, it's the items that are down in the pipe that shouldn't be down there in the first place. So yes, it will have an impact, but ultimately it makes it even more important to actually get that message out to customers through community groups or in whatever way to actually change people's behaviour and not using the sewer network as a waste bin. You know, it's landfill waste that is going down there that shouldn't be going down there.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to bring this session to a close. So